All right, so we're recording now, and I'll share my screen. All righty. All right. So if you're joining us today, you're here to learn about our PhD in curriculum and instruction. My name is Alyssa Yesko. I'm the director of the Pathways into Education Center. Our office advises prospective students on our programs and which program is right for them and answers any questions that they might have about the programs. We also work with our current students who are in teacher preparation programs um, who have questions about certification. We also work with our undergraduate students and our education minors. So we're kind of like a one-stop shop for the School of Education. We're a great place to start if you have questions. So definitely feel free to reach out to us, and usually we can answer your questions. And then if we can't, we will find the person who can. We also have a faculty member from the curriculum and instruction um, from the Educational Theory and Practice Department. Dr. Yagelski is here. And would you mind just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Alyssa. My name is Bob Yagelski. I've been a faculty member in ETAP, Educational Theory and Practice, for a little over 20 years. My primary specialty is English education. I do research in writing and literacy more broadly, and I work in the teacher education program as well.
Thanks. All right. So when we're talking about our program, we're talking about curriculum and instruction, right? So curriculum is the what of teaching and learning. What are you teaching to your students? And the instruction is the how of teaching and learning. So this program kind of encompasses all of that. It's a research-based program, a research-focused program that allows you to further your studies of educational practice and develop new theories of learning. All students in the PhD program engage in scholarly inquiry both independently and with the support of faculty to answer questions that help educators overcome challenges to student success. Students from this program are prepared to meet challenges in this ever-changing field, which I mean, if just in the past couple of years, like with COVID, and a lot of shifting of our instructions, we've certainly seen a lot of changes over the last couple of years alone. And it allows students to take on some new, exciting, and important roles. So our program, as we mentioned, is located in our Department of Educational Theory and Practice. So if you see the word ETAP, or if you hear the word ETAP, we love a good abbreviation here in the School of Education. That's what we're talking about. The program is a minimum of 63 credits. So what that means, students must complete these 63 credits, but typically they are completing more credits than that because they are enrolling for credits while they're completing their dissertation. So when students ask what that means, that's a good way to look at it. So 63 is the minimum, and then as you're completing your dissertation, you're enrolling in credits beyond that. This involves core courses, so courses that are required for all students, specialization courses, which I'll talk about in a little bit, electives, where there are internship and independent study options available, inquiry courses, where you're learning about research methodology and conducting different types of educational studies, and then of course your dissertation. So outside of the credit portion of the program, so what makes up those credits, students also complete a gateway review. So after they complete 12 credits in their program, they are writing what's called a gateway paper, which is basically utilized for the faculty and your advisor to review your writing and research skills and identify early on some areas of strength and areas in need of improvement. So that's kind of like a really great checkpoint, right, in your study. So all students complete that. I talked about the inquiry tools, or the inquiry courses. All students in PhD programs typically complete some type of inquiry tool requirement, typically through coursework. But basically, it's your ability to demonstrate your competence in areas of research and research methods. So that's typically met by through some of the required coursework or the optional coursework that you take. The comprehensive exam, which consists of a pilot study. And typically that pilot study is closely mirrored to your dissertation, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Yagelski, is that correct? Um, and it's usually completed through a scholarly paper and a public presentation of your work. And then, of course, as with all PhD programs, you are culminating with original research through a dissertation study that you conduct yourself and write. So within this program, I think one of the wonderful things about this program is that curriculum and instruction spans across multiple different fields, right? So you could be interested in the teaching of the sciences, but you could also be interested in the teaching of social studies or even art. And curriculum and instruction can be applied. I think we actually even had one student reach out not too long ago whose interest was in the area of mortuary science. Now, of course, we don't have a specialization in that, but they were looking at improving their teaching practice in that area. And so this program could also be right for them. We have some pre-established specialization areas. So we have areas of learning, teaching, and teacher education. So focusing on improving the practices of our teachers, learning sciences and technology, language and technology, literacy, language and culture, science and mathematics education, TESOL and second language acquisition, and social equity and social studies. So we like to think of this as a very comprehensive group of specializations for educators. But there is the opportunity, if there's something that's a little bit more specialized that you're looking to study or research, to kind of create your own or some type of combination of these to create the program plan that you want for yourself. This is just to kind of show you what all of these program requirements look like altogether, right? So all students who are in this program will complete a program planning sheet. So I talked about those core courses. You're able to fill this out as you go and work with your advisor to create this. The specialization courses, the electives, whatever courses are fulfilling your inquiry tool requirement. And then you have your gateway review paper down here, the possibility for advanced standing, which I'll talk about in a little bit. This is just a really great overview of the program requirements and what you would need to finish it. So I always like to include this so that students have a nice visual. So information for our applicants, application requirements, transcripts from all schools attended, 3 letters of recommendation with at least 2 from professors, a personal statement of background and goals, GRE scores. We have deadlines depending on whether you would like to be considered for a departmental assistantship. So if you plan to study full-time and you would like to do work in the department in exchange for tuition assistance and a stipend, then you would need to apply for departmental assistantship consideration. The deadlines for those are hard and fast. You have to apply by the given deadline depending on the term that you want to start. If you aren't applying for departmental assistantship, so I'm looking at students who might be looking to do this program part-time, maybe even work while you do this program. It is considered rolling admission, but there are suggested dates by which you submit your application. So if you're thinking about applying this spring, just know that the application deadline, the recommended application deadline is upcoming. And then for the spring, you would be looking at, and then for the fall, you would be looking at June 1st. So those transcripts, if you have previously attended UAlbany, you don't need to request a UAlbany transcript from a registrar's office. That is automatically sent to graduate admissions. If you have submitted to UAlbany previous other transcripts outside of UAlbany transcripts, it's possible we may have those as well. And that's a good thing to check with because rather than having to worry about getting those transcripts sent over. When we're looking at your academic record, we are looking at your GPA from all institutions and levels. So I've talked to students in this program who maybe didn't have the most wonderful undergraduate experience, but once they went to graduate school and really honed in on what they like to do, they had an extremely high GPA, much more successful at the graduate level. We're going to look at your whole academic record. You can upload an unofficial transcript to your online application portal from other institutions, and that will allow your application to be reviewed. But in order to be officially admitted to your program, we do need official transcripts. And transcripts can be mailed to the graduate school or emailed from the institution. I do just want to point out that the graduate school has wonderful instructions on how to submit all of your application materials. So I am very fancy, and I will just Google UAlbany Graduate School. If you are doing this, I suggest you do the same. It usually brings me to the right place. This is the graduate school's website. And if you go to admissions here and then apply to a degree or certificate program, they have excellent step-by-step pointers, tips, guidelines on how to complete the application, how to use the online application portal, and then specific instructions for all of the different application materials that might be required. So I was talking about transcripts. These are going to tell you exactly where to have your official transcripts sent. So this web page is very helpful. And I will just put it in the chat so that everybody has it. There you go. All right, back to the PowerPoint. Letters of recommendation. These are submitted directly through the online application portal. So once you start your online application, you will have the opportunity to enter contact information for your recommenders. An email will be sent to them with a link and instructions on how to submit the letter on your behalf. We highly recommend that letters of recommendation be specific to the program that you're applying to whenever possible. So make sure that your recommenders know what program it is that you're applying to. Maybe send them the program page so they can read a little bit about it so that they're able to better talk about why you might be a good fit for that program. We also require two of the three letters be from professors. The reason being is that we want to hear from someone who can speak to your academic capabilities and evidence that you can succeed in a PhD program. We have lots of students who have been out of school for some time. In these cases, we are recommending that these students take courses as a non-degree student so that they can obtain a faculty recommendation. So if you have questions about that process, I'd be happy to talk about it. But that's our current recommendation for students interested in this program. The other letter can come from an individual who has observed you in a professional context. This is just a side recommendation that I always give to students is to give your recommenders plenty of notice. When you request the recommendation, let them know about the program that you're applying to, potentially send them your resume so that they can sort of like brush up on what you've been up to, and then also give them a hard deadline. So as someone who writes letters of recommendation, it's always very helpful to hear from the student, I need this submitted by November 20th. It's great for me to know. I love a good deadline. So I always recommend that if you're going to give your recommenders a hard deadline, give them a deadline ahead of when you'd like to have your application submitted. That way you're not hung up and only waiting on that one last thing being a recommendation where you've done your part to complete everything else. Your statement of goals or any written components of your application. We use this to determine your fit for the program. We are reading about you to see if your goals, if what you've told us about yourself fit with what our program offers. We're also looking at what you can offer to our program. What background, what skills, what ideas do you bring with you? We also use this to evaluate your writing skills, so make sure that spell check is on. For you, this is your chance to brag about yourself and tell us about yourself. You'll highlight your background and your skills, what it is that you hope to get out of the program. Focus on your research interests and your area of specialization. There are specific questions that should guide you in writing your statement of goals for this program. So bear with me. This is the program page. And if you scroll down to the required application materials and you click on statement of background and goals, these are the questions that the department expects you to integrate into your response and into your statement of goals. So these are great to help guide you as you're writing your statement of goals. I think it's really helpful that they include this. Be sure that it's purposeful and to the point. So typically a statement of goals is around 1 to 2 pages. And there are lots of helpful online resources that can help you write a strong statement of goals, and your previous institution's career center may also have some good resources or be able to assist you. GRE scores at this time remain a necessary component for the application, and we are not offering any waivers at this time. You can sign up for your exam if you have not done so already through the ETS website, which I believe stands for Educational Testing Services. For more information and to sign up for a test. My understanding is that it's typically offered several times a week. So there's lots of opportunities to take it. And as far as I know, there is still an at-home option, which they developed during COVID for test takers. Frequently asked questions. How long does this program typically take? It depends on a few different factors, but there's a minimum requirement of 3 academic years of full-time study, unless you're studying part-time, which I will talk about. There's a typical completion time for PhD programs of 4 years of full-time study, but there are a lot of things that factor into that, including so whether you plan to study full or part-time, whether you're going to take courses over the summer, your life commitments, the number of credits that you're able to transfer in, your time management skills and motivation, and the type of research that you plan to conduct and your dissertation plans. Just as a side, all requirements for the doctoral degree must be completed within 8 years from the start of the program. Can the program be done part-time? Yes, absolutely. Many of our students do complete the program part-time and they work during the program. It's certainly possible. Of course, taking the program part-time will lengthen the time to completion. The 8-year statute of limitations is still in place and there is no residency requirement. Continuous registration is required, although leaves of absences are permitted when needed. How are courses offered? Online courses may be synchronous, asynchronous, or hybrid. Synchronous online courses will often be offered in the evenings to accommodate working professionals, and students do have the option to take in-person courses as well if they choose, but the program can be done fully online. Can my previous graduate coursework count toward the program? Yes, it can. Previous applicable graduate coursework can count toward the PhD. This is something that you meet with your advisor on after you enroll. So we don't do transcript evaluations prior to enrollment. To apply for advanced standing, you are able to bring in up to 31 credits of coursework from another program. Things that the department will consider when looking at your coursework is the content. So is the course related to the program of study? And the length of time since the course was taken, with courses taken longer ago being less likely to be considered. This is a big question that I typically get. So like, in what ways can I fund my graduate studies? I just want to let everyone know I don't work for financial aid. So this is not my area of specialty. With us being a large institution, we leave those questions to the experts in that office. But I can tell you a little bit about this, right? So one way to fund your graduate studies is through assistantships. As I mentioned earlier, you can apply if you plan to study full-time for consideration for a departmental assistantship. The department offers a limited number of assistantships for doctoral students, which carry both tuition benefits and a stipend. Again, they require full-time study. At this time, remote assistantships are not offered. And you would work with faculty in assisting research or teaching, or in different departments for school or department-wide efforts or advising. For example, I have a student from this program doing actually I have 2 students from this program doing some of their work in my office. You must apply for an assistantship with your application to the program. If for some reason you are not given an assistantship through the department, or you don't apply for one and then later decide that you want an assistantship, there are university-wide assistantships offered through the graduate school. This website is a great website. Funding Graduate Studies gives a really great overview of the different ways that students can fund their graduate studies, including graduate and teaching assistantships. There are some that are posted on our career website, which is called Handshake. And then there are others who are posted on this general page. Right now, there aren't many available, but this fluctuates often. So there aren't many on campus, but there are some additional opportunities in other areas that are available that might be helpful to our students. We also have, there are university-wide scholarships where again, financial aid would be the best place to go to ask questions about those. But then I also like to highlight that the School of Education offers their own scholarships. The reason why I like to highlight this is because it's a much smaller pool that you're applying against, right? So instead of applying against the whole university, you are applying just against students in the School of Education. The School of Education scholarships are they're donor based. So they're not necessarily going to cover the full cost of your tuition, but every little bit helps. These scholarships are typically offered in a cycle where the application goes out at the end of the fall semester, so typically in December. And then this year they were due in February. You can check the website will update as the date for sending out applications comes by. But you can look at the scholarship list from last year, and you'll see that there are many scholarships offered. Essentially, for this application, you will read through all of the different scholarships offered, and you check off any one that you think you are eligible for. There are some that are specific to doctoral students, I believe, right here. There are some that are for everyone, right? So you would check them all off and submit one application to apply to all of them. You can apply for these each year that you are a student here, and I highly recommend that students do this. If you are applying to start in the spring, you can apply for these scholarships. I believe you might even be able to apply for them. Let's see. Sorry. I wanted to see when you're able to apply, like at what point in your, because I know there at some point in your, even if you're applying, you're able to you're eligible for these scholarships, but I recommend you read the whole website. I don't have time to sit and read the whole thing and make you guys sit here while I do that, but this is a great website with a great resource for another financial opportunity. So like I said, financial aid and student accounts or the graduate school are the best places to go for information on tuition and fees, financial aid and scholarships, payment plans, on and off campus employment, all that good stuff. So where to find some more information? So we went to the program page earlier. I'm going to click on it again. I'm sure many of you have visited this program page, maybe many times. Great information about the program. This is where you'll find information about the areas of specialization, the deadlines, the suggested deadlines, and the required application materials, along with those guiding questions for the statement of goals. I also recommend that you get to know our faculty. So this website right here is for the Educational Theory and Practice Department as a whole. This is their homepage, right? And if you scroll down, then you are able to see all of the faculty who work in this department. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the research or the things that they're interested in, you can just click on their name. And you might find someone who has similar research interests to you. So that's another recommendation. The graduate bulletin. This is an overview of the requirements for the program, which I mentioned in this presentation, but I'm going to show you how to get there from the program page, right? So this is that main program page again. Every single one of our program pages has a link to the graduate bulletin, which basically is an outline of all of the requirements. So the core courses, the specialization courses, the minor courses, the inquiry courses. So it basically just gives you a more thorough examination of each one of those requirements for the degree program. And then further, we have the doctoral handbook, which is a huge and wonderful resource. This handbook is available. Oh, come on. Here we go. It's a good place to answer a lot of the frequently asked questions that we get. So you'll see some of the things in the contents, but really great information for prospective students who are maybe considering multiple different programs to get to know our program a little bit better. You can find that either by the link that I provided or on the ETAP department website, which I mentioned has all of our faculty listed. There's also a link to the doctoral handbook. So this is the Educational Theory and Practice homepage. Scroll right down to this purple area over here and you'll see the doctoral handbook. Also the Pi Center, wonderful resource. Not just saying that because I work here, but we're a really great place to answer questions. We're pretty knowledgeable about all of the programs that are offered in the School of Ed, and really love to help our students, especially our prospective students who are sort of in the process of applying. We are very quick to respond to our emails, and we also do Zoom meetings by appointment. So now I'm getting to the questions that were submitted. And this is where Dr. Yagelski will come in handy because he is a member of the department and probably an expert on a lot of the things that you guys are wondering about. So the first question that we got was how many credits from the MS in CDIT, which is also within our ETAP department, can be applied to our PhD?
You want me to take that, Alyssa?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Well, ideally 31, which is the maximum that you can count towards advanced standing. But as Alyssa was explaining a little bit earlier, whether or not specific courses that you took and for which you earned credit in the CDIT program can apply to your PhD program, total of 63 would depend on a number of factors. So for example, you can't use any courses to essentially count for the 3 core courses. And then courses that would count for the inquiry courses are scrutinized carefully. So you may have taken a research course that may or may not be approved, for that particular category. So it depends on circumstances, the nature of your courses. And also, as Alyssa pointed out, if you earned your CDIT more than about 5 years ago, there may be some question about the currency. Although 5 years these days, especially with the pandemic having happened a few years ago, isn't really that long. But that used to be sort of a rule of thumb. It's very loosely applied. So you would, as Alyssa indicated, once you are admitted to the program, you would meet with your advisor and apply for advanced standing. And typically your advisor will go over your transcript with you and then identify courses that might have some question about them, complete the form, and then the form is submitted. Once the form goes through the process, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Alyssa, the graduate school is ultimately responsible for officially approving
Correct.
any courses that are put through on an advanced standing
That's correct.
application,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yep.
I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Are there fellowships offered through this program?
I don't believe ETAP has fellowships. The graduate school might. There are a number of assistantships that are designated, graduate assistantships designated to ETAP. And I'm not really sure if the School of Ed coordinates those because those numbers fluctuate a little bit, but not that much. And I guess this is getting towards that next bullet, scholarships and funding.
Yeah.
There's a lot to say about this, in part because, as you noted, Alyssa, there's a difference between students who want to matriculate full-time and students who are taking the program part-time, because those in the latter category would not be eligible for some types of funding, but they would be for others.
Mhm.
So for example, the School of Ed scholarships are generally available to all students in this program, whether they're full-time or part-time. But assistantships are almost always exclusively for students who are matriculating full-time. The assistantships vary. Typically, if you are awarded an assistantship after you are admitted to the PhD program in ETAP, you would be assigned as a research assistant to a faculty person or given a position that is essentially administrative support. As Alyssa pointed out, she has 2 ETAP students working with her. There are positions around the School of Education that are sometimes filled by students in the ETAP program. This semester, I am teaching a course, a master's level course for our teacher certification program. And I have a graduate student in our doctoral program who is assigned to me as a teaching assistant for the course, for example. So it really depends, and this fluctuates. It depends largely on departmental needs and availability.
Thank you. So I think we did cover scholarships, funding, all of that. The program being fully funded if you are provided with an assistantship.
Yeah,
the next,
it's worth saying that you mentioned, Alyssa, that the average time to degree is 4 years. I think you said something along those lines. And again, this depends really a great deal on individual circumstances, but it's not unusual for students to be awarded an assistantship, which typically comes with the 3-year commitment. As long you're guaranteed the funding for a year, and then there's a commitment for 3 years as long as you're making progress through the program. But it's often the case that students, even full-time students who are making good progress, will get to the end of that 3-year period for their assistantship and still have work to do, typically the dissertation, but sometimes even exams and so on. And so they will apply for additional funding. You can apply for a 4th year of funding. It's fairly typical for full-time students to do that. Sometimes there are full assistantships available elsewhere in the School of Education for 4th year students or elsewhere on campus. So fully funded here is a little bit tricky if you're thinking about the 3 or 4 year time frame. For most students, the answer is yes. But it's also the case that sometimes students will take longer. And on one of Alyssa's slides, she included as one of the factors the nature of the research that you conduct for your dissertation. For some students, the data collection, for example, could span several semesters. We try not to encourage students to design studies that take that long, but it sometimes happens. And in those cases, it's possible that you have exhausted your full-time funding and maybe you're in your 4th or 5th year and you continue to work on your dissertation but move into another situation. For example, one of my advisees who officially graduated last spring, she spent the year writing her dissertation, teaching full-time. She had exhausted her 4 years of support, wasn't finished writing her dissertation, had already gathered her data, and so she moved out of town, took a teaching job, completed her dissertation, and then officially graduated a year later. So that's not an unusual situation.
Someone else wanted us to touch upon language proficiency requirements. I think typically I'll send students with these questions to the graduate school, but students whose native language is not English typically do have to complete a language proficiency test of some sort. There are certain caveats to that, depending on, if they've attended an English speaking university previously, there are certain things, but that's a great question for the graduate school. The graduate school, again, they are the ones who handle our graduate admissions processes and oversee all graduate student policies. So that would be.
Those requirements are university requirements, not ETAP requirements. And so they would be handled through the graduate school. For example, TOEFL scores or things of that nature. We don't review those within ETAP. That's done at the level of the graduate school.
And then this one was sort of a specific question, but are there any education technology courses that are not online?
That's actually a pretty good question. I don't know the answer to that because it changes from one semester to another. There are a couple of factors here, leaving aside the reality that the pandemic really, let's say, accelerated the pace at which the university offers programs and courses online. We have long had a fully online master's, the CDIT master's program. The doctoral program as a fully online option is only a few years old. I believe it was approved just a couple of years before the pandemic. However, individual courses are usually offered. The format for an individual course is usually determined by the faculty person. So we could have a course in EdTech, for example, that is listed officially as either online or in person. And it tends to be offered online because the faculty person who teaches that prefers it that way, or more typically because it fulfills a requirement in one of the online programs. And so, for example, the CDIT program, there are courses there that can be taught either online or in person, but tend almost exclusively to be taught online because so many students register for that program as a fully online option. in recent years in the doctoral program, we have had more students matriculating as fully online students. And so in order to enable them to take courses, the courses have tended to be online more so than fully in person.
Thank you. So those were our submitted questions, but do we have any questions from any of our attendees who are here today? We covered everything.
Can I interrupt and just ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course, please.
So, I have not been in school for a very long time. I've been teaching the last 18 years. So I don't have any professors to ask. Unless I was allowed to, I adjunct at a local college, but I'm not a student of theirs. So that seems like a gray area. Does the University of Albany allow me as a non-matriculated student to sign up for online classes so one of their professors could write it?
Absolutely, yes. So that's actually what we would recommend, right? So if you apply as a non-degree student, you can take courses up to 12 credits before you matriculate into a program. Once you're assigned an advisor, you can let them know my plan is to apply to the Curriculum and Instruction PhD program. That way they know and they can help you select coursework that they know will count toward the program. Although I know many of the courses in the program do count toward the program, toward the PhD program. Take those courses, make a good impression, right? Make yourself known in your classes, and try to connect with the faculty in any way possible so that they can write a strong letter for you. We have had lots of students who have taken that route. Now, of course, something to keep in mind, taking non-degree courses in the department doesn't guarantee your admission to the program. But it has a lot of benefits, right? You get to dip your toe in the water, you get to see if the program is right for you, get to know some faculty, make progress toward the program so that if you are accepted, you've got some credits under your belt. So there's a lot of great benefits there.
And I would add that your situation is quite typical. I mean, our doctoral program is one of the few doctoral programs on campus that allows students to matriculate part-time. And I don't know what the breakdown is at the moment with the students who are currently in the program, but historically, we have had more part-time students than full-time students. And your situation is quite typical. Educators, professionals who've been teaching or working in research or some other area related to education for a number of years decide they want to pursue a PhD, but it's been a long time since they were formal students. So if you were to apply, I think Alyssa's recommendation is right on target, particularly because it's been quite a while since you've been in a classroom. And there is a need to sort of assess your academic abilities. In large measure because the program is designed to prepare you as a scholar and a researcher in education. But your application would not be unique in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
We had someone ask in the chat, does the program accept e-permits from other grad programs? That's not something I'm familiar with, so maybe Dr. Yagelski, do you know anything about that?
I don't know what an e-permit is.
Oh, okay, it was my question.
Yeah.
I work for CUNY at Queens College. I'm a grad advisor. And basically we just allow students to take credits at other schools, whether it's like CUNY or SUNY, if they find like another course that connects with them better. So I was wondering if
so for us that's called cross-registration.
Yeah, cool.
I believe that's what it's called, and that would be, I think, part of your that would be part of your advanced standing. So if you were to take a course at another institution, that would be applied as advanced standing. So essentially like as a transfer credit. Now, if you were planning to study as a full-time student, what I don't know is whether a course taken at another institution would count toward your full-time status. And Dr. Yagelski, do you happen to know that? I think that's a grad school policy.
Yeah, that would be set by the graduate school. I don't know the answer to that. I would recommend that you check with them on that.
Yeah, so if you are planning to apply for an assistantship and you need to maintain full-time status, I don't know if courses taken elsewhere would count toward that status, but certainly it would be the same as if you had taken the course previously before applying to the program and using it as advanced standing, you would just apply for advanced standing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't know if you guys can answer this, but how strict are you with, or how strict is the program with the GREs?
So like what kind of scores are we looking, or like is there a cutoff or anything like
Is
that?
there a cutoff? Because like I know some schools like they're like whatever, and like other schools like it's a must. So,
I think somewhere on our website it says, yeah, whatever. No, I'm kidding. I can only answer that from my own experience. There is no cutoff score. We have a lot of flexibility in admissions decisions as long as the applicant meets university graduate school rules that are hard and fast. And those tend to be procedural more than anything else. Individual programs have a lot of autonomy in making decisions about admissions, for example. And in the years that I have been involved in admissions decisions, it's rare that the GRE score is a primary factor. I'm not even sure we would require it if the university didn't require it. So, it's sometimes I think applicants are scrutinized a little bit more carefully with respect to the GRE because there may be perceived weaknesses in other aspects of their credentials. But your personal statement, your academic record, your letters of recommendation, those are the things that matter most. If the GRE was consistent with other weaknesses in your credentials, then it would probably weigh more heavily in the decision that is made, because that decision for admission is made at the departmental level, not by the graduate school. Does that help?
Yes, that makes me feel way better. I appreciate that. I wasn't expecting you to say that, so I'm like, wow, okay, cool. Thank you.
Well, there is an ongoing debate about the GRE, and it isn't just on our campus. It's everywhere. But we have autonomy in a lot of ways to make determinations about program requirements and so on. But some things are out of our control, and that's one of those.
Thank
I
you.
could also mention the GRE can also be a positive thing. If let's say you're not very confident in your academic record and you perform very strongly on the GRE, that might be able to show academic competency in a way that your academic record does not. So, that can also kind of work in the reverse.
Yeah, and those things are scrutinized. The applications are looked at pretty carefully. If you were, for example, interested in doing work in math education, and your GRE scores were really high in language and low in math, the reviewers of your application would be like, what's that all about? And so then your transcripts might be scrutinized a little bit more carefully to see, is there some pattern here? And is this person applying in an area where he or she is not really strong? So it's more along those lines, looking for how the GRE scores might fit into the overall set of credentials that you're presenting in your application.
Thank you.
I don't know if anyone can hear me, but I have a question too.
Yep.
Is it required to take a part-time or take a couple of starting courses to have your GRE, or can you just sign up non-matriculated for some of those core courses?
Oh, you mean to take the courses before you're admitted to the program?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, there's a limit to the number of courses that you can count that were taken as a non-degree student prior to being fully admitted. And I believe, Alyssa, do you know what that number is? I thought it was
12 credits.
Yeah. And the core course, for example, I think it would be unusual to take something like one of the core courses before you matriculate, but it wouldn't be prohibited. But you would have to make sure that if you were doing that, you didn't exceed the 12 credits. If you took, for example, 15 credits, only 12 of those would would be applied once you, if you took them as a non-degree student, only 12 of those would be applied
Okay.
towards the requirements.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You know, there is the possibility sometimes of requesting waivers if there are unusual circumstances. So if you have a question along those lines, it's always a good idea to ask. If you're in the process of applying, the graduate school is the first place to ask those questions. But if it's a program level matter, then they just refer your question to us.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to put the graduate school's email address in the chat just so everybody has it. I'll also put our office email address in there too.
Yeah, the people in the graduate school are pretty good. They know the rules. They're pretty helpful. And we often consult with them when we have students with questions about various kinds of university requirements and policies. So I wouldn't hesitate at all to contact them if you have any questions about the application process. You know, I should say one other thing, Alyssa. You know, our policy in ETAP is to make sure that anyone who meets the requirements for admission can actually do the work that they're interested in doing in our program. We have our faculty is not large. We have 14 full-time people in tenure track lines, but they reflect a real diversity of scholarly backgrounds. And so on the one hand, the strength of that is that we can accommodate, as Alyssa said early on, we can accommodate a real variety of scholarly interests on the part of students. But the downside of that is that we don't have concentrations. Like there aren't 5 of us in social studies education or 5 of us doing the learning sciences or something along those lines. And so it can be sometimes challenging for students with interests that are unusual to be supported in ways that enable them to successfully complete the program, because you need to have mentorship. So you need to have faculty who can guide you, even if their areas of specialization aren't exactly aligned with yours. They at least have to be in the general area so that they can provide you with the kinds of guidance that you would need, particularly when you get to the pilot study and then the dissertation study. So that means that sometimes qualified applicants, we tell them that, you know, they're qualified to matriculate, but we really don't have the resources in the areas of interest that they have applied in to enable them to be successful. And that's not a rejection in the strict sense. It's just to say that when you're admitted to this program, you're assigned an advisor in your area. And the assumption is, it's not a requirement, but the assumption is that you'll work with that advisor as your mentor for the whole time that you're in the program. And typically that advisor becomes your dissertation director. Not always, and it's not a requirement. You can change that. But if we don't see a match between your interests and a faculty person in that area, then we will let you know that and essentially say, if you come here, it may be difficult for you to do what you really want to do. So I think in some cases, people misread the responses as if we're saying you're not qualified to come here. But it's a big commitment to do a doctoral program. And even if you move through quickly, you're still doing, you know, 3 or 4 years of your life of full-time study and more if you're doing part-time. And we want to make sure that there are people here who can support your interests and make sure that you can complete the program and, you know, move into whatever career path you are planning to move into.
Have you ever had a student that, you know, their interests of research didn't match with anyone and they still decided to, you know, get their doctorate from here?
Yeah, typically there's 2 sort of situations that fit with that scenario. One is a student has a particular interest and it's obvious that we can't support that interest, and we might recommend that they look at a different graduate program on our campus that we're aware of. Like, for example, someone might be interested in an area in education that's really more aligned with ed psych, for example. And so we'll recommend that they move there. The other situation is a little bit different and maybe along the lines of what you're asking, in which the particular interests of the student don't match exactly with the areas of expertise of the faculty, but they align closely enough with a general area that we feel that we can support the student. You know, I was thinking a little while ago when Alyssa was talking about the program's areas. Some years ago, I was on a dissertation committee. This was not my student. It was one of my colleagues' advisees, but she was a coach. She was a college women's, I believe she coached field hockey. And her dissertation was a study of coaching techniques. Now, as far as I know, there's nobody in our department who has any expertise in that. But the general area of pedagogy is one that many of us would count as areas of expertise. And so the person who was her dissertation advisor is not a coach and wasn't, as far as I know, ever an athlete either, but was able to guide her in her research, because we're all expert in research design, and that's a really important part of the program. And then as far as the material related specifically to the research and the available research and coaching, well, we could provide some guidance on where you might, you know, explore that, but none of us has done work in that particular area. So I guess the answer is yes, it's rare. Usually it's not a really big, gap between our areas of expertise and the specific interest of the student. And when it is, as in that case, that particular instance, the fundamental questions that the student was addressing in her research were still within our areas of expertise, so that she could still put together a dissertation committee to support her work.
I had mentioned the student who reached out with interest, their area of, they were a college faculty member, mortuary science, but perhaps their particular interest was on instructional design or on moving their courses online. We do not have a faculty member who specializes in mortuary science, but we do have faculties who are experts in instructional design and instructional methods. So, you know, that could still be a match depending on how they explain themselves in their statement of goals as why our program does fit with what they're looking to study.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be a good idea, as Alyssa suggested earlier, to look through the faculty profiles on the website. And even it's not unusual to for prospective students to email faculty members directly and ask them, you know, this is what I'm interested in. Do you think that I could matriculate in the ETAP program? Would there be support for me to do this kind of work? It's also the case that sometimes you have a general idea of your areas of interest, but not a very specific sense of the particular research questions that you would address eventually in your pilot study and then your dissertation. And that's fine. I mean, part of what happens in doctoral study is that you refine your interests and deepen your expertise in a particular area of specialization. And sometimes that's not clear at the outset.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for spending a little bit of your time with us today. I hope that this was informative, and maybe we'll see some of your names come across as applicants. That would be wonderful. Yeah, and please feel free to reach out if, as you know, after today you have additional questions pop up. We're happy to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye now.
I know.